thank you for all my helpers.
Perfect, great. And then if you're able to mute yourself, if you're off mute, just to hear a little bit of background noise, so it's slightly distracting. I have ADHD, so when I hear background noise, I'm like, what's that noise? I can't pay attention to what's happening. So when you think about virtual events, this Zoom environment that we're in, and I'm going to ask you to be interactive, so please use the chat to kind of respond to questions that I have here. And when you think about being in this virtual environment, what do you love about it? And what do you not love so much about that? So I'll wait for you to kind of take a moment to really reflect on that and drop that into the chat box here. What do you love about this virtual environment, and what is not so exciting for you? So I love that, I believe it was maybe Jennifer, nod your head if you were like, I don't even know what a virtual summit is. And so we're actually going to start there with my presentation. I have a couple of slides, but I tend to be a very organic presenter. So let me pull my screen up here. Move my slides on over this away. That needs to be. So there we go. Let's get ourselves into present mode. Perfect. So all of you are familiar with the title for our presentation today, Running Virtual Summits That Won't Crush Your Soul. You'll see a lot in my marketing, and you'll hear me talk about soulfulness and the importance of that. And so that's not just an important part of this presentation, it really is the essence of my business. And I'll share a little bit more about this. This slide has tons of words on it, sorry. It's really just the bullet points of what you saw as the takeaways in the meetup event. So we're going to touch on the things like how you can kind of get clarity on taking your passion and creating a virtual summit around it, getting some understanding of why leveraging other people's audiences is really the best way to have a successful event. We're going to talk a little bit about some timelines for like planning and launching and running the event. And then you'll hear me pepper in some different tips on what kinds of tools that you can leverage, what kind of systems, and how it doesn't need to be super complicated and expensive to execute on a virtual summit. So we're going to talk about in a moment what is a virtual summit, but I want to hop over in here and just review what we've got here in the chat about what people love. So people love access to the people worldwide, convenience, not having to travel, the efficiency. Yeah, it's a lot about reach, right? Meeting people all over the world, connecting, yes. The drop-in, the kind of casual aspect of just being able to drop in, missing the one-on-one connection and networking. Tech is challenging, it can be isolating, harder to get nonverbal feedback. Yeah, and a lot of information, almost too much. Sometimes it doesn't flow in a user-friendly format. Love all of this. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here, guys and gals, because I really feel like the things that you talked about in the chat is really the things that I loved and didn't love about virtual events. But let's start by helping put us all on the same framework. What is a virtual summit? A virtual summit, and I just pulled this off of like a website that does virtual summit stuff. A virtual summit essentially brings together industry experts, leaders, and speakers together online, and they're all talking about or discussing a specific topic or theme. So all of you, I didn't write all of this down, but every single one of you could theoretically create a virtual event. So I'm going to stop my share here. I'm going to go back and forth between my slides. So just, you know, show of hands here. How many of you know people that do similar things to what you do? Awesome. All of you could run a virtual summit, because a virtual summit is gathering other people that kind of have expertise about a common thing, right? And so even though sometimes people get a little bit weird about, well, they're my competition, I don't want to bring them in. I suspect if you're here with Joyce's and you're in Joyce's audience, that you're not very competition oriented. You are probably more collaboration oriented. So I really like to think about virtual summits as like, it's really a collaborative opportunity to bring more of the good, awesome, juicy stuff that you do in the world to more people, right? And that's really what a virtual summit is all about. But it doesn't require that you're booking a hotel room and booking a conference room and traveling to this place and all of this kind of hard logistics. And you're really more just like, oh, I'm gonna just, create this digital space. It's a great example of what happened with Joyce today, right? We had this meetup event scheduled. There was something wacky with the Zoom event. It literally took her 4 minutes to change the location of the meeting, right? And she literally was able to be like, oh, everybody, now it's here. And you weren't like driving north on I-25 and you were supposed to be going south and you'd turn around, right? For those of us in Colorado, that joke makes sense. So it's really this idea that it can be very, very simple to gather all these people, right? You guys didn't have to travel anywhere to be here. You got to be where you are and show up and gather to learn about something that's interesting to you. So get back to my slides. So the thing that I think is really fun is that all of you shared in the chat how exciting it is to be able to gather with people and connect regardless of our geographic location. And so I think that that is really what is a virtual summit. What do you run a virtual summit on? So it sounds like all of us have gathered all kinds of different life experiences and things that we're leaning into in our business. And so when you're thinking about, well, what do I want to run a virtual summit on? I want you to really think about what is your passion. And so you all went around and did your little elevator pitch. I'd love for all of you to just kind of close your eyes for a minute. I do a lot of this kind of stuff because I'm a soulful, soulfulness is really my jam. So I want all of you to just take a moment, and I'm going to have us all close our eyes. I'm doing it as well, so you can peek if you don't trust me, but my eyes are closed. I want you to place your hand on your heart, and I want you to take 3 deep, slow breaths in. And when I say the word passion, I want you to think about what is it that you're passionate about? And I want you to be able to kind of say it within 3 words. So we're just going to take 3 breaths. And in 3 words, I want you to be able to crystallize what you're passionate about. Okay, so now I'd like you to go ahead and put that phrase in the chat box. And I'm gonna move this video out of the way so that I can see what we've got. Yeah, we've got some good stuff coming in here. Okay, Joyce, using LinkedIn effectively. Lori, connecting through stories. Jennifer, recovery for survivors. Conscious sexuality communication. Financial literacy equity. Shortening job searches. Feeling your best. Feel worthy and enough. Okay, great. So as the rest of you are putting your 3, or maybe some people had to be extra and put some extra words there, that's totally fine. I see you out there. I want you to write down on paper those things that you just wrote, because that could be the name of your summit. A virtual summit is your passion. If your virtual summit is not your passion, it will crush your soul. Simple enough, right? Okay, we can end this presentation now, right? It has to be your passion and nothing outside of that. I'm passionate about people finding joy in their business. Joy is the best strategy. That's my 3 words. Joy is the best strategy. And so when we're joyful, we can kind of really back into that and say, well, how do we be joyful? It's really about aligning with what's in your heart and your soul. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I developed the themes for the upcoming summit that Joyce and Lori both mentioned that they're a part of, that I'm running in a couple of weeks. But you all just started developing your virtual summit, right? It has to line up with your passion, and it's all about keeping it simple. So like I said, soulful business and sales, like for me, like running my business from a place of joy and soulfulness, it's all about connection. And so one of the things I saw in the chat when you were saying the thing you don't like about doing virtual events is this idea of like, there's something missing, right? We're missing that connection. And so your job when you're running a summit is, if you think about, and I'm going to stop my screen share for a moment. I mean, we're only, I don't know what, like less than 10 minutes into this presentation. I'd love for you to unmute and kind of tell me like what's jumping out at you already just about this presentation. What are you loving so far about this presentation? Unmute and just say like, what is it that you're loving about this?
I love your hair.
I love my hair too. My hairstylist is in Longmont. Her name is Diane Lovato, and she owns District 303 Art of Hair. It's a family-owned business. I love them so much. Yes, thank you about my hair. I literally didn't do anything to it. I woke up.
That's what's so cool about it.
But what's jumping out at you about like, just what are you loving about this so far?
How much sharing we're all doing.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say the same thing. You guys just demonstrated that. It's like, you still can connect even if we're on the computer.
Yeah. Awesome.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. What about for you, Jennifer?
I love your joy. It comes across, your passion.
Oh, thank you. Colleen, how about you? I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I am loving the idea, as a solopreneur, I miss working with groups or with people, a team. And this would give me an opportunity to work with a team, with a group of people.
Yeah, perfect. Marianne, I see you unmuted.
Your enthusiasm, bar none.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, I love that. So you can see like, and think about yourself, right? Like when you're doing a thing around the thing you love, like that's how you show up too, right? You're not thinking about it because you're in joy. You're in your flow state. And what happens, and this is what I do with my clients, is, we get all bogged down in like all of the technical pieces, right? We worry so much about that. And so, yes, running a virtual summit, Lori said, it's a lot of work. There are a lot of pieces, but there's also a lot that you can just let go of, because your people that are going to want to lean in, like they're not going to care if you have the perfect click funnel and all the things are perfect and you get all the emails and all the flow. And like, I don't know if this is like a PG-13 or a PG, I don't know what, but like screw all that shit. It doesn't matter. And if you're worrying about that, then you're not in joy, because we can't be in joy and worry at the same state. Those states are opposite ends of the spectrum, and they don't play together. And so, so we just modeled for you that like, this is literally what this is a virtual summit in some ways, right? Like Joyce creates virtual environments where we're gathering together and she's bringing in experts, and you guys are all experts in your own right. And we're all learning and growing and connecting together. And so I want you to just remember that a virtual summit, and there's different ways to do them. The ones that crush your soul are not going to allow you to tap into what we just experienced, right? That connection, that joy, that enthusiasm. There's a lot of virtual summits out there that I think are way more work, where people are doing all these pre-recorded things. And then there's like all this content, and you got to figure out which track do you want to go down, and all of those different pieces. We're talking a little bit about the importance of just keeping it simple. So let me go back to my slides. I get so excited. So I might get like lost in what I'm talking about and miss my slides. So I'm going to keep checking back in with that. So yeah, just think about your connection. So Joyce talked a little bit about me and my background, but I want to dive, just like give you a little bit more of a background, like in some context to my journey. So I worked in HR for 15 years. I thought I was going to do HR forever and ever. I wanted to actually launch a business in the corporate coaching and consulting space. And in order to do that, despite the fact that I had 15 years of experience and I have a bachelor's and master's degree in the HR field, I really wanted to do executive coaching. And so I went to a program called IPEC, which is the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, to obtain my, my certified professional coach certification. I went to that program because I had already been doing coaching in my entire HR career. I went to that program to get the piece of paper, but it ended up changing my entire life. It really cracked my soul wide open. Like that's the phrase I use, because I realized that I was walking around with all these different masks on in different areas of my life. Who I was in my career was different than who I was in my marriage, was different than who I was with my friends and my family, and so on and so forth. Like, how many of us have had like those experiences where all of a sudden we're like, wait, I don't even know who I am. So my coaching program really cracked my soul wide open, and it helped me to see that my joy was actually missing in so many different places. So I ended up going through this program, and 3 weeks after I finished it in January 2017, I actually was unexpectedly fired from my HR job. And there's a story around that, which we don't have time for all the stories that I could tell, but I ended up losing that job, and it was a catalyst event, and it ended up really transforming me in a lot of different ways. I'm from originally the East Coast. I'm from the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, super tiny town. And I left and I moved across the country with my then husband, and had a lot of different things that happened. One of the things that happened after 3 job losses and 3 times of trying to start my business, I ended up getting a sales position at Constant Contact. Now, this job came to me. I didn't go find this job. This job came to me. I was trying to figure out how to leave my marriage, and I was unemployed. I didn't have a car. I was totally broke because I had gone through all these moves and a lot of different turmoil in my life, and tried to start my business and all these different job losses. And I was in a place where I just kind of was leaning into my faith and saying, like, I don't know what you're doing, God, but just show me the way and I'll walk there. And I got introduced to somebody that was going to hire me to do some contract work for her. And in our conversation, she was like, it sounds like you're looking for full-time work. I think you'd be great in a sales position at the company I work for. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Sales is gross. I would never want to be a salesperson. It's slimy, it's icky, right? Like all the things that many, many people think about sales. And she was like, I work at Constant Contact. It's an amazing company. I think you'd do great in it. And I had heard of Constant Contact before, but there was this realization for me in that moment that, wait a minute, the 3 other times at that point I tried to start my business, what was missing from a skills perspective was sales and marketing knowledge and understanding. And so I was like, wow, this is just being laid in front of me. I better take this opportunity. You don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth. You also heard me say, I started and failed my own business 4 times. So after I finished working at Constant Contact for a year, very successfully in a sales role, I left there to go start a business with a friend of mine. And that business fell apart a month into it. And that experience, I want to pause for a moment and just say, like, that experience kind of put a bad taste in my mouth for working with other people. I don't know if any of you have ever worked in a partnership, but like, it's hard because you're relying on other humans. And inevitably, when you have other people involved, somebody's going to be more passionate about the thing and more committed to the thing, right? And so having worked in HR, I know that this is just real, right? Like something is always more important to one person versus the other. So I started 4 businesses before I decided to launch Proffit Coach. So that business fell apart. I ended up breaking up the friendship, breaking up the business, and I moved back to Colorado from Idaho, where I started that business with my friend, and I started Proffit Coach. And when I started Proffit Coach, I kind of was like, what am I passionate about? That was literally the first question I asked myself. I had $200 to my name. I was just kind of like, I need to start a business. I have nothing to invest in it. I have $200 to be able to live on. And I thought, the thing I was passionate about at that point really was email marketing. I loved working at Constant Contact, and I loved the idea of like, hey, like being able to grow your list is important. Being able to stay in touch with your people, it's important. And so I started my business doing email marketing strategy consulting, and I was profitable in my first month. I signed 3 clients, and people that knew me were like, how did you do that? I was like, oh, it's sales. I understand how to have sales conversations. So I pivoted my business into sales because I was that human that hated sales, didn't make really any sales in my other businesses. I learned how to sell, and I was so passionate about talking to small business owners, which was literally what my job was at Constant Contact, that I thought, wow, I love selling now. Let me teach other people the skills around sales, and then let me inspire them that like they can be a good salesperson, but what it takes is that their heart is in it. And I think a lot of people sort of feel and run into this idea that like sales, and I promise we're going to get to virtual summits in a moment, but this context I think is important. Sales really can be this soulful thing, because at the heart of sales is relationship building, and at the heart of relationship building is connection. And all of you here on this call, like you all just said how important connection was to you in this virtual environment. And so when I started my business in October 2019, I was successful right away. I had a lot of involvement in Fort Collins Startup Week in February 2020. And that was my first time doing a large event. Now, this was not a virtual event, but it was an event that was related to the mental health in the entrepreneur world. And so it was a half-day event. We had vendors, we had speakers. It was a very well-attended half-day event that we ran up here in Fort Collins, and we modeled it a little bit after, I think it might have been the Boulder Startup Week. They did a brain crawl event. So we modeled ours after this, and it was really successful. And then looking at the timeline, everybody, what happened after February 2020? Anybody remember, or have we forgotten? The pandemic happened. And so when the pandemic happened, I was in the process of additionally running my business. I was launching a women's networking chapter in Fort Collins in Northern Colorado. And the day that everything shut down here in Fort Collins was the day that we were having our launch event. We had 30 people signed up to come to this information session around this women entrepreneur and business owner network organization that I was launching a chapter of. And so NoCo Thrive was the very first virtual summit I ran. And it was really in response to this thing that we were going to do in person no longer was able to happen. And so we thought, what can we do to gather people together in this time of uncertainty and do it in a virtual way? So my leadership team and we came up with this idea for NoCo Thrive. And it was about thriving in the face of uncertainty. It was open to the Northern Colorado entire community. It wasn't just women. And we thought, what are people looking for? We knew that there was so much uncertainty. So we were bringing in people from our economic development team because all of the economic development directors, they were getting so much information and they were all looking for ways to get that information out. So we were like, well, hey, we're doing this thing. Why don't you come in? So we were like, let's leverage their audiences, right? So we were thinking, who do we know that knows business people who might want to gather together and commiserate and get inspired and educated and all of those things? Let's hold a container for that to happen. And then we kind of said, like, where are those people that might be interested in that? We ended up having, I think we had like 260 something registrants for that event. We're going to talk a little bit about how we did that because we started from a place of not having a list at all. September 2020, we actually had another large women's conference that was a virtual event that the overall organization of Weibo, they saw what we did with NoCo Thrive and they were like, wow, that was amazing. How did you do that? We want to model what you did in that Northern Colorado event and do a virtual nationwide summit. And so we did. It was very successful. They did a lot of the things that we did successful, but what I learned in that event was a lot of the different back-end operation things like the speaker application and how to gather information and then disseminate it to the speakers and contributors in a way that they can then go out and market. So I learned a lot of really powerful things about what has to be happening behind the scenes. I'm great on stage. I'm great, like, this is my jam. I love this. Like, I literally put this presentation together in like 15 minutes, right? Like, because I had it all here and then it's just like, I just need to disseminate it, right? So I'm good at this, but the behind the scenes detail organizing things are hard for me because I have ADHD, as I mentioned when we first started, and I heard a bunch of noise from people being unmuted. So that event really showed me, hey, I'm good at this. People are looking at me and they're saying, wow, you can do this. And I'm like, it's not that hard. It seems like it's a lot of work, but like if you love what you're doing and who you're doing it with and who you're doing it for, that's going to shine through, and that's what matters most. And so in January 2021 was the first time I did the Soulful Entrepreneur Summit, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I wanted to give you some context on like, why am I the one standing up here telling you all these things? So I'm going to pause for a moment and just kind of see, does anybody have any questions or curiosities that are bubbling up about my story or the experiences or anything like that? Go ahead and just unmute yourself and feel free to chime in. I'm going to sip some water here. No? Awesome. All right. Everybody's like, just get into the good stuff, Allison. Okay. So we already did this. Think about what you love, because this is the key. And, you know, thinking about what does that look like to you? And so this goes beyond just like what the topic of your event is. So here's what I'd like you all to do. We're going to do a little exercise because I'm very hands-on, right? It's like I can sit here and be a talking head, but like, what is that going to do for you? You're going to take any of this and like go and apply it? I don't know. But if I put you into this mode of like experiencing it and really reflecting, I really feel like that's going to create some action for you. So I want you to write down, we already did the what, right? Your 3 words is kind of the what, okay? So I want you to write down the word how. And when you think about how, what I want you to do is I want you to think about how do you learn best? So when you think about when you go to a virtual thing, what do you love about those things, right? How do you feel most engaged? So I'm just going to give you a moment. We're like literally going to be doing a little bit of workshopping here. I also want you to think about, you know, I mentioned earlier, like there are some virtual summits that do a lot of recorded content. So are you a person like, that's another how, like, think about it. Like, do you really love having content that is delivered live and like has these like little live action engaging things? Or are you somebody that really likes that on demand and like, I want to watch it when I watch it, and you love the recordings? Maybe you like a little hybrid of the two. Are you a person that likes to have engagement, or do you just want to kind of be off on your own doing things? Do you like the community aspect of things? Do you want to have a place like a Facebook group or some other community component where you're going and engaging digitally, but like outside of the actual meetings? So I want you to just take a few moments and reflect on that and write down, how is it that you like to experience things, right? Like learning. And maybe even think about like events that you've gone to that you really, really loved. Like, why did you love those events? What was it about those events that just jazzed you so much? So when you look at that this becomes the framework of how you're going to run your event. Okay. So what I mean by that is, for me, for example, the very first year we ran the summit, I knew I didn't want fancy technology, right? How many of you get overwhelmed by technology, right? Show your hands, like, do you feel comfortable with Zoom? Right? Like, we've all gotten comfortable with Zoom. You can run your whole event on Zoom. You don't need to do webinar. We just literally do our whole summit this way. And that was a very conscious decision because there are a lot of options out there. There's tons of technology options. You can pay a lot of money for them, and they've got waiting rooms, and they've got, you know, vendor halls and all these things. I'm here to tell you, you can successfully run a virtual summit on Zoom using the tool that you know how to use. Okay. You might need to upgrade your Zoom account so you get more storage, or like, you know, like there are some aspects of that, but like if you know how to run Zoom, you can run your event on Zoom, and it doesn't need to be super complicated. If you don't like Facebook groups, you don't need to do Facebook groups. Now I can tell you, last year when we ran the first event, I knew the importance of the community aspect, but I couldn't think about that yet because I get really annoyed with Facebook groups. Like some people love Facebook groups, but again, ADHD, it doesn't serve me. I can't operate in that world. It's noisy. I get distracted. I go down rabbit holes. So I try to just kind of do what I need to do and then get off of it. But when you're engaging in a community, it's like hard to kind of have that separation. So last year, we decided very last minute that we were going to use a tool called Mighty Networks. I love Mighty Networks. And one of the things I want to encourage all of you to do is like, and this isn't me trying to sell to you because there's a free version of the ticket for the Soulful Entrepreneur Summit. I encourage you all, because you're here, so virtual summits is something you're curious about, come to the summit. Because what I love to do is I love to model what I teach, right? So come to the summit. You'll get to go into Mighty Networks and get to see like how we're doing it, right? There is something beautiful about looking at what other people do, but then just deciding to do your own thing. I've actually only ever been to 2 virtual summits. One of them I hated, the other one I loved, and I was a part of running it, right? Like the women's conference one. I loved that one. And so I took the parts of it that I loved, and then I left the parts of it that I hated, and I made this event my own. So it's so important you're just doing it the way you want to do it. That's the beautiful thing about being an entrepreneur. There's no rules, right? So so that's kind of the framework, right? The how. Was that helpful for you to think about and reflect upon? Okay. So so the next thing I want to say is the next question, and again, there's lots of other pieces, like we can't get to everything. I wanted to kind of give enough of an overview to get your wheels spinning. So the next thing I want to talk about that does come up is like, well, how do you get people? You know, let's start with, how do you get speakers? That's usually a question people have, like, how do I find the people? Well, remember, I had all of you raise your hand and say, like, how many of you know people that do what you do? You all raised your hands. I shouldn't have to tell you, where do you get your speakers? Sounds like you all have a pool of speakers that you could pull from, right? So that's one place that you can get your speakers from. The other place you can get your speakers from is by you know, thinking about people that maybe do something complementary to what you do, right? So maybe they don't do what you do, but what they do is complementary. And so think about, it's almost like, remember when you started your business and people had you like write down that list of like the 100 people you know? It's almost like you're doing that again, but through a different lens of like, who would I want to bring into my world that I think could add value to my audience? Right? So make that list and then reach out and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the logistics piece of it, but that's where you get your speakers. Now, if you kind of go through that process, as you're then finding people that you know that you're like, yeah, I really think they're going to be a great speaker, then you can say to them, hey, do you have anybody that you think, right? So it's about kind of starting in your inner circle and then going to your inner circle's inner circle, and then you can go out wider. Now, the first time we did our event last year, and we'll talk a little bit about timelines, but when we put out our call for speakers, how many of you, show of hands, how many of you want to be speakers? Right. Most small business owners also want to be speaking. So like, put a call for speakers out there, you're going to get responses, right? The first time we put our speaker application out, we were blown away. We had like 53 speakers apply. And a bunch of these were people that me and my co-planner didn't know before this event. So because, you know, we all raised our hand, right? Like we all want to be on a platform. We all want opportunities to share our knowledge, our spin on what we're passionate about. So that's how you find the speakers, right? So now let's talk about, you have speakers and then you're like, well, how do I market it, right? So in terms of marketing, the most important thing is OPA, right? Other people's audiences. This is not about you only marketing to your thing. In fact, I will be totally honest, I'm probably the person that does the least amount of marketing for this event. You know, we're putting some content out there, but really it's our speakers and you know, our sponsors that are, they're feeling our passion. They're seeing the love and energy we're putting into our event. And they're like, wow, this is powerful. Like, this is going to be so cool. And so leveraging other people's audiences is a fantastic way of getting the word out there. And so this is really about starting from a place of like, oh, like this is all very simple. Would you guys agree? Like, I'm not sharing anything that's earth shattering to you or proprietary. This all very much makes sense, but it's a matter of like executing on it and not being afraid of telling your speakers, hey, what we're going to expect from you is by you having the opportunity to come and speak on this thing, you're going to then send out, you know, this many emails and these social media posts, and I'm going to give you the things that you need, right? I'm going to give you the marketing copy. I'm going to give you the images. And it doesn't mean that you have to make a bajillion different things. It's like you start with one template and then you very simply just add in like that speaker's picture. It sounds like it's a lot, but once you have that foundation in place, it's really not a lot. It's like you need a couple of graphics, you need a couple of things that like highlight what it is that your event is on, and then you need to have like a place where people can go and register for it. So you've heard me say, keep it simple. I'm from the corporate world, and we always said, like, follow the KISS method. And in the corporate world, it stands for keep it simple, stupid. And I don't think that anybody should be calling anybody stupid. So I've coined the phrase to mean keep it soulfully simple. Everything that we've just talked about is very much about keeping it simple, right? Like, who do you know? And who do the people you know? That's kind of how you get the people. What are the tools that you already use? Oh, you use Zoom? Cool, use Zoom. It's not complicated. Where are you hanging out? Are you hanging out on Facebook? Put the stuff on Facebook. Do your group in Facebook groups if you're comfortable with that. And so we've sort of talked about a little bit your theme. So you've come up with the overarching, whatever your passion is. So I'll just use Lori as an example, because that one just sticks out in my head, connecting through stories. So Lori's summit could be the Connecting Through Stories virtual summit. Okay. Now, Lori, I'm gonna pick on you and ask you to unmute. So if I were to ask you to rapid fire come up with what are 4 buckets or themes within the context of Connecting Through Stories?
How to write a book, how to storytell in marketing, how to figure out what your story is. I don't know, there's gotta be more. Those are the
Okay.
3 that jump out at me.
Okay, perfect. So we had books, we had, I'm sorry,
Marketing.
say it again, marketing. Yeah, books, marketing, which is kind of marketing. Books is kind of marketing, but it's kind of different. So
Like actually, like for authors, how to write a book. If you want to write a book, how do you write a book? That would be like one bucket. One bucket
Okay.
would be, if you're a business owner, how to use storytelling in your marketing.
Okay.
And another one, which could be for anybody, would be how to actually develop your story, or how to know what your story is. You've already got one, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna pull back even further, right? So what Lori just was using as examples, and I'm just gonna pick it apart just a little bit, so don't take any offense. But like when I hear what you're saying, that sounds like talk titles, right? Those aren't themes. So let me give you kind of an example. So the Soulful Entrepreneur Summit is about bringing soulful entrepreneurs together, and it is a 5-day event. Your virtual summit doesn't need to be a 5-day event. It could be 1 day, right? I did a 5-day event because I had done a half-day event, and then I did a 3-day event, and then I did a 5-day event, and then I was like, I'm going to do my own 5-day event, right? So don't start with 5 days, folks. Like, unless you've done it before, right? Start with half a day and then do a day. So what we have for ours is we've got a different theme every day. So day 1, to be a soulful entrepreneur, I've identified that it's mindset. That's day 1. The next theme is soulful money and time. How are you approaching your money? How are you approaching your time in your business, right? It's like resource management is what day 2 is about. Day 3 is about soulful messaging, right? Day 4 is called soulful community building. And day 5 is called holistic success. It's bringing it all together. So none of that was the how to blah, 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 right? It's like bigger umbrellas. So we've got a big umbrella, and then we've got like our ponchos, right? and then you can kind of figure out like what's the outfit you're wearing underneath the ponchos, right? That's the talk titles. Really great summits include different ways of then addressing those themes, right? You can't necessarily have 5 speakers on every single day. And I'm looking at the time, Joyce, and I'm seeing we're like 3 minutes to 2:30. So I see you looking. I promise I'm going to wrap up here in just a few minutes. So identifying the structure, like for me, when I think of the how I like to learn in these virtual environments, I enjoy panel discussions, but then I also like presentations that give actionable things, right? And so that's how I've structured my event. You don't need to do what I'm doing, right? You got to figure out what's good for you. But I really like the panel model. So on Soulful Time and Money Day, we've got a panel discussion, and then we've got 3 different presentations throughout the day. And because I like fun and I like soulfulness and mind-body activities, we have little breaks involved. We've got breakout rooms scheduled into the whole day, right? It's very intentionally and consciously designed. Dang it, I thought I was going to get to everything and I'm not going to. So I'm going to pause for a moment because I want to honor that Joyce has this to go to 2:30. and just kind of check in with you, Joyce, to see where you would like me to go. Because I feel like I've got like 10 more minutes.
As
Maybe
far as
5.
I'm concerned, I'm fine with the 10 minutes. Keep it, we'll have that for the recording, of course. If anybody here needs to leave, I absolutely understand because you have other commitments or whatever it might be, and it was advertised just for the 1 hour. So I'd rather have it, especially for purposes of the recording, Allison, to have it feel complete to you. So
Okay.
keep going.
Perfect. Great. So, so yeah, thinking about that in terms of just the structure, right? The themes, like how do you structure the event? You have to look at what's important to you. What have you enjoyed at other events? And that's why I'm saying, like, come check out our virtual summit, right? Like, come check it out. You already know, you think like 3 of us are here. So hopefully you think me and Lori and Joyce are cool and you want to come hang out with us a little bit more. Come to our summit so you can see, like, here's how we do it. There's many ways to do it. There's no one path to success. So thinking about the timeline, so when you are thinking about launching a summit, you do kind of have to start with, like, what's the time, like, how big is your summit, right? Our summit is 5 days. That's a big event. So we started our planning conversations in September, right? We had our first meetings. We kind of were identifying what's the date that we're going to do. And then we kind of backed in from the date. We knew it was going to be the last week of January. That's like our week that we do our summit. And so then we can back into, okay, what has to happen next? The first thing you have to do, obviously, if it was a live event, you would have to go book a venue and all those things. And that's very limiting, but yay, virtual summits. You don't have to do that. You have a Zoom link, it's yours. You schedule the room. So the timeline for a bigger event, back up, and you kind of want to look at like 4 or 5 months out is really when you want to start your planning. And then the next thing that you do is you then start figuring out who are your speakers going to be. So I'm going to kind of combine timeline and execution. It's really important to find a way for you to be collecting information about your speakers. And you want to think about what are you maybe going to need? You're going to probably need like their name and their email address and their bio, and why do they want to contribute to your event? Have they spoken at events? What is their exposure? So one of our application questions is, what's your social media following and what's your email list size? And then we ask, are you willing to market, right? Like, these are all things that you want to include on whatever your application form is. I am in love with Google because Google Drive, like Google Forms, Google Sheets, Google Docs, all things like that's really where we do our organizing, is utilizing the Google suite of tools. So some people really love what's the other document one? I can't remember what it is, but there's a bunch of file sharing ones, but for some reason I love Google, so it works really well for me. So we use Google Forms for many of our things that we're having our speakers submit information to us in. That's a learning lesson from year 1 to year 2, because last year when we did everything, we were having people email us stuff. We had created speaker folders in Google Drive. And so they were like dropping things into their individual speaker folders. And then that meant we had 40 places we had to go and look for things. It was horrible. So this year we're like, everything's on Google Forms. That way it's in a spreadsheet. We can very easily cross-reference things, right? And then you can use that Google form after you do your application process. Then it becomes a checklist of like, did I get this from them? Do I have a speaker agreement from them? Do I have what I need from them? Are they doing a freebie opt-in, and those different pieces. So that's kind of like a combination of the execution and timeline. And so once you are about, I would say, so our event is the end of January. We started marketing and launching ticket sales November 11th. We liked the idea of 11/11, so that's why we did that. And so do that math, that's November, December. So that's about 2.5 months before our 5-day event is when we started marketing and driving ticket sales. And we had different ticket timelines and sales. So you don't have to do that. You can start by just keeping it super simple and just say the tickets are this much and this is what it is. You don't need to have different levels. You can, but you don't have to, right? Start simple. And so from a marketing perspective, again, leverage other people's audiences. And I think that this is the thing, and Joyce and Lori could chime in on this here in terms of what they think that we've done well from a marketing perspective. But it's really about giving them what they need so that this doesn't become a big giant homework assignment. Now, it doesn't mean that they don't have work to do. Like, yes, there are tasks that they have to do, and we've been really organized about telling them what they need to do. And if they didn't do it, reminding them. Like, that's kind of our job, right? It's like we're managing them, right? Like, pretend it's like an organization and you're the boss, but you're a super like badass rock star, cool, soulful, joyful person doing it. So the marketing becomes really important, but if you're not leveraging your speakers to market and giving them what they need, and then like doing your posts and just telling them, hey, just take my posts and share them out, that's a really great thing that you can leverage too. So that's, I mean, hopefully some of what I have shared has been useful. You know, this is the second year I've run this event, and I've had so many people tell me, like, you are so good at this, like, you need to be helping other people with this. So this isn't a very formalized mastermind that I've put together. I don't like the word mastermind, but it's really like, I believe that it takes about 4 months to fully successfully, like, really get something off the ground. So if this is something you think you'd be interested in joining, my vision is it's going to kick off in March. And really, it'll be about helping whoever is in this mastermind to ideate, create, and then celebrate at the end of their event, and kind of walking through the journey with me and other people who are kind of going through it together so that you can learn and grow and launch your event successfully. So if that's something you're interested in, I'm going to drop all my information in the chat box. My contact information is here. So you're also certainly welcome to just email me and just put in the subject line, you know, or in the email that you met me in Joyce's event here today. And that's it. Thank you for giving me just a couple of extra minutes. Look at that, not too far out there. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing and just kind of open up the floor and throw it back over to you, Joyce.
Well, that was terrific. I'm glad we took those extra few minutes. I'm going to stop the recording because then we could just, people might rather have it be that way if they wanted to bring something, but we'll keep the meeting going. Okay, do you want to receive? Okay, so I'm